So just over 10 years ago, I stood on the same stage, and I played to the biggest audience I'd ever performed in front of. I got my first standing ovation, and I felt on top of the world. But 6 months later, a lot had changed. I was ready to sell my guitar. I never wanted to sing again or play my music for anyone. This crazy roller coaster I experienced is not unique, and so many musicians have had a similar struggle. Today I'm going to play a couple songs, but I also want to tell you my story and tell you how 10 years later I'm still writing and performing music. To tell you the story, I have to talk just a little bit about the value of music. Not how the world values music, but how I value music. I've come to believe that the process of creating music, not the result, is the most important part. At 20 years old, I started to own my identity as a songwriter after a few years of dabbling. My brother and I, who's here, had started a rock band, and after that dissolved, I just kept booking shows as a solo singer-songwriter. During this time, all I wanted to do was create and share what I was making, so I wrote a ton. I was constantly filling journals, scribbling down lyrics, just trying to let that next song out. I didn't always love what I was making, but I knew that the only way to get better was to practice. I recorded my first album in my basement, and I started to tour as much as I possibly could. On a small scale, I started to get noticed for my music, and I started to build an audience. One time I remember I was walking down the street in Seattle, and I got stopped by a random fan. I remember just feeling so cool. However insignificant that moment seems to me now, at the time I really saw it as a sign that I was on the right path. Everything was kind of fueling me to create more and to dream bigger. I wanted to sign a record deal and have a booking agent so I could tour the world. And I wanted to make albums in fancy studios. And I felt like I was on the right path. I'm going to play a little bit of one of my favorite songs from that first album that I made. Whiskey flowers sway like a breath in the woods of our freedom. They've stood to the test, but you fought a long time. Some think it's been too long, but I dread this day ahead. Oh, I dread this day ahead. I wouldn't talk to you. You sat there wanting me to. I wouldn't listen to you. You dreamt I'd hear the truth. As I was playing and performing a lot more, I started to really get a ton from the response I was getting from people. This thrill of wowing someone or making them feel something, even making them cry. It started to become a little bit of an obsession. Just after my big show in this theater, I released my second album. I had borrowed money from my family, thanks Mom and Dad, to record in Seattle with a real producer. This felt like a really big leap for me, and I had big expectations for what it would do for my career. I booked a tour like I had done a lot of times to promote this new album, and that's when things sort of started to fall apart. No one was coming out to shows or buying copies of this new record. I remember sitting in the van before a show in Salt Lake City. I called my mom crying. I was just so confused and frustrated. It felt like no one was connecting with this new music, and even the people that had been my biggest fans up to this point just didn't really like it that much. I had tried so hard to impress people, and when no one was impressed with what I had made, I really had nothing. I was beyond devastated. I had traded my love of songwriting for these new feelings of disappointment and self-hatred. I stopped being able to be vulnerable in my music out of fear, and this album that I really did love making just kind of felt like a thorn in my side at this point. Even for a while, the sound of my own singing voice was painful to hear. Years later, I wrote this song about that feeling. Built up just to be broken down, cherished just to be forgotten now. You lay there quietly. Is there any breath left? I dance around you violently, hoping to raise the dead. Bitter the taste, the aches that you make my heart feel. And I'm losing my love of the one thing that made me heal. At this point, I had resolved to give up on my music. But I was still such a big music fanatic, so I turned to building up others. I really did believe in other people, and I believed that other artists sharing the music that they were creating was so important. I started to reform my identity around this idea of celebrating and supporting other artists. I even started a blog where I could share about work in the community that I admired. I stayed connected to music through a new band that I had formed, and I started to write songs again, but from a more protected place in my head, keeping a safe distance from being too honest or trying too hard. Ironically, this next song I'm going to play I wrote for that band early on, and it's had the most commercial success of anything I've made. But it's called Songbirds Tune. Group of birds flies out south to the coast. Don't you wish you could fly along to the coast? Every flower blooms, every songbird's tune, alive to fill the air. Every thought of you, every chair for two, a world without a care. Ooh, Several years later, my husband and I opened a music venue. We had met through live music, and we had this shared vision for how a supportive space could impact a music scene in a city. And this fit into my new identity as a supporter of other artists. As a part of my work at this venue, I started to host a local open mic each week. And this open mic just kind of brought me back to my love of songwriting. I was in this place where the value of my music was in my own hands again. I could write and perform a song each week at open mic without any pressure or need to impress anyone. Early on, I wrote a song called Slow It Down and played it at the open mic. And I'm going to play a little bit of that for you now. Slow it down. Keep your feet on the ground. Die a little each day. Knowing so far there's nothing more to say. This is it. This is it. This is the magnificent passing of the torch in the right time. You are my, you are my, you are my great prize to be won after years of toil and strife. Can you burn? Can you rust? Are you turning to dust? Is your fire as bright as it always has been? Are you tired from the fight? Are you losing your light? Is despair chasing you down for the win? What is it that you want to win? Slow it down. Keep your feet on the ground. This song was like my subconscious speaking directly to me and telling me that this prize that I thought I needed to win through my music wasn't success or money or fame. It was my own life and my existence as a creative person. As I kept singing this song and performing it, the message of it started to sink in, and I kind of started to feel safe again in my own songs. As humans, I really believe we need creative processes that naturally flow with who we are and what we're going through. But for musicians, we have to constantly fit our art into this broken industry model that is always putting our creativity on trial. But I think just doing the work should be enough. Obviously, any art that we share with the world will be judged in one way or another. But if we can value the sheer act of creating above everything else, something really wonderful happens. We can accept healthy critique, an important part of our creative growth. We can cope with business failure tied to our art, which is something that is inevitable if we are putting ourselves out there. But most importantly for me, I think if we hold on to this, we can continue to be drawn back into the creative process over and over again. And that's what brought me to music in the first place, and that's part of what makes me who I am. Thank you.